ways there. So the three of you took a more collaborative approach in the sense that you really worked together to get the cycling and exercise programs up and running in each of your respective sites. So what do you have to say to other clinicians and kinesiologists who may be trying to get a clinical program up and running at their respective site? Let's start with Jen.
Well, I guess, it'd be important to kind of tap into the expertise that's already there. So reaching out to other programs that you know about, and finding out maybe how they started and what some suggestions are. But definitely you do need the support of the operations folks. And so if you don't have that, it's an uphill battle. So maybe those would be the first conversations I would have, is talking to them, enlightening them on the benefits, why should they think about having this in their program? And so that would be the first recommendation, is to start there, and then don't reinvent the wheel, borrow from all the other programs, right? Like we all have policies and procedures written up on how to assess a patient for safety, what kinds of things do you monitor for, just borrow, and we're all happy to share, absolutely. So I think that's probably where I would start. And of course, if you needed any help, right, in trying to sell the message of why your program should have a intradialytic cycling program, then just reach out to us and we'd be happy to share for sure.
Awesome. Clara, Stephanie, anything to add to that?
I would just say two things. I think it's and it's really something that Jen already said. I just want to highlight it, is that really the support from the other two nephrologists on this podcast has been incredible. Like, we can reach out, and if there's a problem, if you're worried about something, anything, they're there. So, to find that kind of support, because sometimes it is frustrating, and sometimes people don't believe that exercise is helpful and think it's all a joke. And so it's good to have people that can kind of bring you back off the ledge sometimes, and can make you feel like, okay, what I'm doing is worthwhile, and I'm going to move forward because other people have had success with it. Yeah. And then I guess the other point I would like to make is that really, because this is requiring people with kidney disease to actually do the exercise, it's very important to engage with those people and make sure that the program is set up and is addressing the needs of the patients and the goals of the patients as well. So
yeah, that was what I was going to add too. Like, that patient pull can be really important. And then I found with operations, like, finding out what they think is important, because the thing that I found resonated with them is, like, it can help some people not cut the run short. For some, that was the thing that mattered to, like, oh, the manager's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Whereas, going on about quality of life, like, it didn't matter as much to them. And then I will say, like, the role of the nephrologist, like your colleagues, you need your people, like Clara said, to make you think that you're not crazy. But in terms of nephrologists, I will say that the role is just don't mess it up. Like, just don't mess it up. And so don't worry if nobody who you work with is excited as you are. Maybe they will be one day, maybe they will not. But it's okay. It won't.
You mean like the day-to-day clinical nephrologist in the unit, right? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
They're busy. They have their own concerns. You just don't want them to mess it up. So you don't want them to go around discouraging it or tell people they can't do it, but they don't necessarily have to be cheerleaders.
Yeah, fair enough.
But you do need, sorry, just one more thing. You do need the cheerleaders, though. You need the champions. So you need your physician champion, and you need an exercise specialist champion as well, and an operations. So you need that triad really to get the program going.
Yeah, for sure. So those are definitely some enablers to setting up a clinical program. Thinking back to your earlier days and kind of when you first were starting out, what were some of the barriers that you came into contact with when starting up your clinical program? Clara, we'll swing it back to you. Maybe start us off here.
So the biggest barrier occurred when our one kinesiologist went off on maternity leave, and it taught me the importance of redundancy. And so you know, if you build a program on the premise that an exercise specialist is going to be there, then you need redundancy. So you need more than one exercise specialist. We also didn't have the we still don't in many units have the luxury that staff are keen enough to put the bikes on, and so that has been a bit of a barrier. And then number three was when long ago, the first time this happened, the operations decided to change the chairs in the units, and they didn't actually contact us before they did that. So then we had to scramble to modify the bikes we had to fit the chairs. And bed bikes are still a bit of a challenge. Like, people biking on beds are still a bit of a challenge that has not been completely solved. So those are my four.
Your barriers, yeah. Maybe we'll pass it on to Stephanie. Any barriers that you experienced starting up your clinical program?
Yeah, much the same as Clara. You know, cost always comes up, but actually, I will say this. In the developed world, I think I can say this, and this is what I believe. There's always money for the important things. Okay, so that I don't believe was the main barrier. I actually think and know from what was said, from what patients said, it's attitudes and perceptions. Attitudes about who should be exercising. You know, they would always refer the young, healthy patients, you know, instead of the people who are frailer and could benefit most. I would say, you know, we're here to do dialysis, not exercise, because it is extra. And it's in an environment where, you know, the urgent's always prioritized over the important. And people are short-staffed. So that sort of bigger contextual picture was a huge barrier. So I think, you know, for that, the staff had to hear from their patients firsthand. I could tell them all the benefits, but they have to hear it from who they're looking after, that it works for them and why. And that's far more compelling than any sort of list I can rhyme off. So that to me was like this big culture thing that still hasn't totally shifted, but it has gotten better in terms of what people should be doing during dialysis. You know, people are sleeping, things are quiet, they're easy. It is more work. And if you're already stressed, that's quite a bit difficult, particularly if maybe you don't see it as part of your job, you don't know anything about it, or it's something that you struggle with yourself. So I do also think that it presses a nerve in people sometimes, exercise, because people feel guilty, like they're like aware of what they should be. So it's very complicated because it's a behavior. And so you have all of that playing into the fact that you just want to get this person a damn bike, you know, and it's so it can be disheartening, I think, at times, because, you know, you hear people benefit from it, but there are all these obstacles. But I think the longer you persevere and the longer you amass this group of people who are doing it and talking about the benefits, you'll always go back to that and get your strength back and think, no, this is the right thing. We can do this, and we want to do it well. So I'm going to keep trying to motivate people and remind them about why we're doing this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jenn, any barriers that you can recall from your site?
Pretty similar to the others. I think staffing. So, and I mean like the everyday nurses thinking that, you know, it's not part of their job to help with the exercise program. And so bringing the bike over to the patient is like one additional request that they feel really they shouldn't be partaking in sometimes. So luckily that attitude is diminishing, and the culture is changing in the unit now after 15 years. That's a good thing. But so staffing for sure, and the pressures that they face, and then the lack of an exercise specialist. So ensuring that, you know, that you do have redundancy in your system. So on the days where a kinesiologist is not available, the exercise rate drops dramatically, right? So it really is important to have somebody involved in the program who's physically there and reminding everybody like it's exercise time. So those, yeah, staffing for sure, biggest barrier.
Yeah.
Can I add something that you said, Jenn? I want to pick up on when you talked about like bringing the bike as one more extra thing. So I can remember doing this qualitative study, and I've been wrestling with this, like, oh, you know, they're stretched, like they're, you know, the staffing's way down. But then the things that were acceptable were interesting. Like the staff didn't mind being asked to get warm blankets, broth, coffee. And it's like, well, why? Like the bikes actually can be wheeled over. It's not an occupational issue anymore. So like, why then is the bike it's just not in the culture, it's hardly the task sometimes. It's just like you say, the culture, because all those other items are part of the treatment.
I think it's also not just the culture. I think it's fear of the unknown. I think they're not comfortable, as with nephrologists too. I think that's sometimes why nephrologists are not as kind of positive about exercise in the unit. I think they're not comfortable with exercise. I think they're worried about then being responsible for something that they don't really know and don't feel comfortable doing. And so I think that's another reason why an exercise specialist or a kinesiologist in the unit really makes a huge difference and kind of makes lends a more positive culture to it, because it takes the responsibility or the perceived responsibility off of the staff that don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's a great point.